everyone, welcome to Itsy Bitsy's live read from Pigs by Daniel James. Prologue. The big bad wolf wore a navy single-breasted suit and black tie. His line of work tended to get messy, so he avoided the more formal double-breasted suits in favor of off-the-rack tailoring. The disposable surgical gloves stretched taut over his strong, slender fingers had originally been white. Now they were stained with red and black poppies. One hand wielded a pair of fiendishly painful pliers, the other dauntily held the freshly pulled fingernail of Lou McCannon's right ring finger. "Give me the names," the wolf repeated, his deep baritone voice patient and neutral behind the mask of latex and black fur. Who else was involved in that job? Who set it up? Huffing and panting from the ongoing ordeal, McCannon watched his brutalizer stand there in the harsh light of the barn through his two swollen eyes, and once again attempted to dodge the question by feigning confusion and ignorance. He was now down to 7 fingernails, or so he guessed. It had become difficult to distinguish the blistering heat of each sensory outrage at this point, and he had become lost in confusing, pulsing throb of pain and the current tally of misery consisting of 2 plier-pried incisions, his right canine, multiple bodily contusions, and very shadow stinging cuts that cried out with every thump of his stressed heart. Behind this stranger was the rubbery snarl stood a line of similarly cheap-suited men, wearing rubber pig masks with some truly gruesome detail. A militant army of slaughtered swine, led by the toothy apex executioner. The wolf-headed inquisitor, unsatisfied with his subject's stubbornness, leaned in close, his shoulder blocking McCannon's view. McCannon's uncooperative attitude was crumbling proportionately with the systematic raging of his body, and yet his blood-engorged tongue, quivering behind his remaining crimson teeth, only surrendered an intermediate plea which morphed into another screech of agony, bouncing off the weathered brick walls and timber beams of the empty cattle barn. Silently, the wolf backed away softly, and through tear-filled eyes McCannon noticed that he held something up like it was some important clue. It was his own right index finger, severed at the first knuckle. It would never pull another trigger, never caress a hot piece of ass or skim through a bundle of greenbacks. Unsurprisingly, he noted, there were some physical traumas which could still arise above his more comparatively trifling wounds. His missing nails and teeth, briefly forgotten while his stump gushed, the wolf tossed the right digit into the bucket of slowly accumulating body pieces. McCannon thrashed against the coarse ropes binding him to the rough wooden chair's armrests, blanching a shade below bleached bone as he watched another warm, rhythmic jet spritz from his knuckle stump, barely missing the wolf's polished black leather shoes. He was done. He couldn't hold out any longer, wondering how much of him would fit in that pail. It was amazing he had lasted this long. He was part-time thief, not one of the hardened leg breakers he regularly rubbed shoulders with, but when the only true deterrent against spilling secrets is the threat of violence, it quickly loses its power in the presence of actual violence. "Okay," he begged, his naked body hot and sweating profusely in its agonies, so much so that the nightly chill sinking deep into his bones was incapable of offering any discomfort. Gagging on his own copper-zinged blood, he gobbled it out like thick red wine. "I'll give you the names." Between his raking sobs and pouring tooth sockets, speech was messy work. "I'm dead, either way." The wolf nodded quietly, dispassionately at the captive's accurate assessment of his situation. Afterwards, He speed-dialed the number while one of his slain pigs in suits placed the cold muzzle of a semi-automatic pistol against the base of McCannon's skull and splashed his dreams, fears, and any other secrets he harbored across the hay-strewn muddy concrete. He's saying, sir, we have the names. The wolf obediently listened to his following orders and then hung up. It was feeding time. Free bird. It was going to be a long ride north to Chicago, 5.5 hours, but it couldn't possibly feel as long as the ride down here to the Menard Correctional Center of Rudolph County, Illinois. Isaac Reed leaned his head against the cool glass of the Greyhound's window, feeling the prison transport bus lurch and roll on the hydraulic hiss of a giant silver snake. With the prison in the muddy Mississippi at his back, Isaac listened to the conversations of the jubilant passengers overlap into the mysterious of good cheer and excitement. Some of the men talked of their cravings for cigarettes, booze, food, female companionship, and, in less salty instances, their eagerness to be reacquainted with their relatives. Good for some was all Isaac thought. Outside his window, the rambling farmlands looked gray, matching the sky and making the whole horizon resemble flesh on life support. He was nervous. Nervous about the coming reunion. Nervous about letting Maggie and Will down. Nervous about ruining his fresh start. Yet it was going to be a long 5.5 hours to the last stop. A heroin-thin Latino was an impoverished black caterpillar over his top lip gave Isaac a friendly nudge. Isaac turned to look at the young banger beside him, bristling with energy, his gray sweater draped over his bony frame like a tent. You know what else? We're all freezing our nuts off in these prison-issue rags, broke. I'm not seeing that as a reason to be pissed. Isaac glanced down at his own prison-issue black sweatpants and not nearly thick enough sweatshirt. Garments which would be of little use once autumn shriveled and died under the imperialist frozen of winter, and looked back up at Hex Barrandus. To me, it's a push in the right direction. It's telling me that I fucked up once before, and I ain't never going back to that place. No way, dog. No way. I'm out of that life. Not wasting my time with that bullshit. The young reformer's voice was gaining traction and speed as he worked to convince himself with the pumped-up prep talk. Lost enough vetoes already. Know what me saying? He was holding tight to his manila envelope packed tight with family photos and letters which had seen him through the hardest parts of his stint. Isaac's own hands were empty, but his trouser pocket did carry the standard Bureau of Prisons payout, $20. Barely enough for a bus ticket once he reached Chicago. He could have called Maggie for a pickup. His release wasn't a surprise for her and Will, but he didn't want them driving to pick him up from the bus depot. Call it pride, or most likely shame. That's cool, Hex. Isaac gave him a supportive smile. Sounds like you got yourself some big game-changing ideas. Hex was one of the few allies cool with Isaac. Squealing on others was a strict no-no, even if it was purely out of vengeful spite. It tended to leave a mark on one's rep. Fortunately for Isaac, his rep could boast of associations with enough powerful names to balance out his one act of finger-pointing. You're a sartistic Panch Corraba, Hex smirked, exposing a few gold teeth. Fucking bitch? Isaac cocked one eyebrow, wondering if any of the gutter Spanish he picked up had stuck. Hex flashed a bit more of his polished grill, his wide grin accentuating his gaunt cheeks and deep, cadaverous eye sockets. It was some kind of miracle that he had managed to kick his habit in the joint of all places. Pretty smart, Blanco. So, phrase one is, he framed an idyllic picture with his inked hand, get the fuck away from my block. How do you manage that with only that change in your pocket? You'll spend most of that on smokes. Well, that's phase 2. Remember when I told you my cousin was looking to hook me up with a job at a car wash? Isaac did, vaguely. And who said getting that diploma wouldn't pay off? Heck nudged him again. The both of them trading survivor smiles, and the young Hispanic flitted off to try to bum a smoke and further conversation from one of the other dozen ex-cons. Late nights. Last night's lack of sleep snug up on Isaac, covering his eyes with his heavy hands. It was an excitement which had kept him awake. He wasn't too surprised to accept it as fear. A crawling sensation, marching its century of centipede legs around his neck and guts. Did the other guys on this transport feel the same way? Isaac splayed his right hand, the dirty, slush-colored sun glinting off his wedding band. They had just hit St. Louis. Only 4 hours to go. He clenched his right hand into a fist and allowed the sleepy thief of time to take him under, and the vibrations and the ocean noise of chatter washing him away to an uneasy sleep. Isaac snapped awake to the buzz of excitement in his ears. The antiseptic white lights of the bus were on. Isaac squinted away the poor excuse of slumber and noticed the cause of celebration. The bright skyline of Chicago was a large electrical etching against the amber dusk. The bus finally wheezed to a stop outside the Greyhound station on West Harrison Street. Stepping off the bus into the chilly scrape of the windy city, Isaac tried to work out the kink in his lower back, lightly scraping his feet to get the blood pumping again. He watched the other 50-50 make-or-break cons hug and kiss emotional relatives and friends. He eased through the affectionate gathering unnoticed. A few of the other loners were slinking off in directions of halfway houses, down unreachable rungs of a slippery economic ladder. A few more of the doomed group would be strolling off towards their next relapse or their grave. He was about to step off the curb when a hand gripped his shoulder. It was Hex, teeth already chattering from the cold, but his smile broader than ever. "This is it, ma'am. The future starts here." A tricked-out ocean blue Cadillac was prodding along the curb towards them, subwoofering, decimating the paving with Cypress Hill or some such. Isaac wasn't too clued up on rap music, Latino or otherwise. Hex cocked his head to his ride. "Dropped you someplace?" "I'm good. Been away for a dime. I could use the walk. Figure out what I'm going to say to them." Hex clapped Isaac's right hand and turned him in shoulder to shoulder, slapping him on the back. "You take care of yourself out here, amigo. You too. Be good." Hex slid around to the passenger's side. "Hey, if you ever need a car washed, look me up." Isaac smiled and watched him vanish into the probable cause on wheels. He hoped Hex made it. He sincerely did, but he was a realist. There wasn't much of a chance of anybody making it with only $20 in their pocket. They were all left to fend for themselves, now in this cold world without tools or fire. Thank you for listening to this portion.